In the small and peaceful village of Lutanda, the sun rose slowly over the wide fields and clay huts every morning. The air carried the smell of roasted maize and wet earth. Life moved in simple rhythm. Men went to the farms, women gathered at the stream, and children laughed as they chased goats through the dusty paths. Among the many families in Lutanda lived a quiet woman named Amina and her husband Kwame. Their home stood near the big mango tree, where the wind always whispered through the leaves. They were good people, humble, kind, and always ready to help others. But there was one thing that made them different from other couples. After many years of marriage, they had no child. At first, people were kind and hopeful. They would say, "Do not worry, Amina. Children come when the time is right." But as the seasons passed and no baby came, the whispers began. It started softly, one woman speaking to another while washing clothes by the river. Soon, the whole village seemed to know Amina's pain, and her name became part of their gossip. When Amina walked through the market, she could feel the eyes that followed her. Some women smiled too brightly, their faces full of hidden laughter. Others turned away, whispering to each other. "Poor Amina," one would say, "her womb is as silent as the dry river." The words spread like wind. Some laughed behind her back, others mocked her openly when she passed. Amina heard every word, but she never replied. She only smiled, even when her heart trembled inside her chest. She would walk home quietly, her basket filled with vegetables, her spirit heavy with unspoken tears. At night, when the village grew silent and the moon shone softly through the window, she would kneel beside her sleeping mat and pray. Her husband Kwame loved her deeply. He was a calm man who worked hard on the farm and respected everyone. When he saw her sadness, he would hold her hand and say, "Do not let their words trouble you. We are blessed with life and love. That is enough." Amina nodded, but sometimes the pain was too deep to hide. In the evenings, when the sky turned red and the crickets began to sing, Amina would sit outside their hut, watching other women playing with their children. She would smile when the little ones called out to her, "Auntie Amina." But when they ran back to their mothers, she would lower her head and sigh. The worst moments came during village gatherings. When women gathered to pound yam or fetch water, their laughter often turned into quiet gossip. One would say, "I heard Kwame might take another wife soon." Another would reply, "Can you blame him? A man without a child is like a tree without fruit." They did not care if Amina was near enough to hear. Sometimes she pretended not to notice, but every word sank deep into her heart. Yet, Amina never returned their cruelty. She continued to greet everyone kindly. When someone fell sick, she brought them herbs or helped fetch water. When a child was hungry, she shared her food. Some women wondered how she could still be so gentle. One even said, "If I were her, I would curse everyone who laughs at me." But Amina only said softly, "Curses grow thorns, and I do not want thorns in my heart." There was one old woman in the village, Mama Jalea, who saw Amina's pain and pitied her. One day she said, "My daughter, sometimes people mock what they do not understand. You may have no child yet, but your heart carries more life than all their words." Amina smiled and thanked her, for those were the kindest words she had heard in a long time. Kwame tried to protect her from the gossip. He spoke to some of the men, asking them to tell their wives to stop. But the mocking continued. People said that Amina's kindness was only a mask, that she cried every night and cursed her fate. They even said that she had angered the ancestors. None of this was true. Still, there were moments when Amina's strength faltered. On some nights, when the rain fell softly on the thatched roof, she would whisper to the heavens, "What have I done wrong? Why must I be the one they mock?" Then she would remember Kwame's words, "We are blessed with life and love," and she would calm herself again. Time moved on and the seasons changed. The rains came and went, crops grew and were harvested, and new babies were born in the village. Amina helped at every birth, washing the newborns, wrapping them in soft cloth, and whispering blessings over them. The mothers would thank her, though some still whispered after she left, if only her own hands could hold her child. But Amina believed that kindness was stronger than mockery. When she walked through the fields in the morning, she would talk to the sky, thanking the Creator for another day. She found peace in small things, the sound of birds, the smell of fresh rain, the laughter of children. She decided that even if she never became a mother, her life would still bring goodness to others. The women who mocked her could not understand how she could remain so calm. Some even began to feel uneasy when they saw her smile. Her peace made them question their own hearts. Slowly, a few began to change. One of them, Sifa, who had once mocked her the most, came to Amina one afternoon and said, "I am sorry, Amina. I spoke foolishly. I did not know what pain my words caused." Amina looked at her with gentle eyes and said, "Words are like seeds. When we plant them they grow. Let us now plant better ones." From that day Sifa became one of her closest friends. Still, not everyone changed. Some continued to laugh behind her back, but Amina no longer felt wounded. She had learned that silence could be stronger than anger, and grace could defeat shame. In Lutanda the days went on. The sound of drums and laughter filled the nights, and life continued under the wide African sky. But in one small hut by the mango tree, Amina and Kwame lived quietly, two souls bound by love, walking through whispers and storms with faith as their shield. When the moon rose high and the stars spread like scattered salt across the sky, Amina would whisper one last prayer before sleep. "May those who mock learn kindness, and may my heart never lose peace." Her words floated into the night, carried by the wind that moved softly through the trees. And though she did not know it yet, the same wind that carried her prayer would soon bring the first signs of change to the village of Lutanda. The sun was bright over Lutanda when the market opened that morning. The smell of roasted corn and dried fish filled the air. Women laughed, bargained, and sang softly as they sold their goods. The sound of drums came from a distance, mixing with the calls of traders. In the middle of the busy market, Amina walked slowly, carrying a small basket of vegetables. She moved quietly, smiling at those she met, though many still whispered behind her back. It was market day, a time when people from nearby villages came to trade. Strangers passed through, selling herbs, beads, and carved wooden spoons. Amina had come to buy salt and palm oil. As she walked past the spice stalls, her eyes met those of an old woman sitting under a big umbrella made of palm leaves. The woman's face was wrinkled like the bark of an old tree, and her eyes shone like the morning sun. She had gray hair tied in a scarf and bracelets that jingled softly when she moved. "Come here, child," the woman said in a warm, slow voice. "You walk with a heavy heart." Amina stopped, surprised. Few people spoke to her kindly these days. "Good morning, grandmother," she said politely. "I am fine." The old woman chuckled softly. "Fine? The way you hold your shoulders tells another story. Sit with me for a moment." Amina hesitated but felt something peaceful in the woman's voice. She sat on a small wooden stool beside her. The woman introduced herself as Mama Zuri, a traveler who moved from village to village selling herbs and sharing wisdom. She watched Amina closely and said, "Your eyes are gentle, but they hide sorrow. What troubles you?" Amina lowered her gaze. "I have no trouble, grandmother," she said, though her voice trembled a little. Mama Zuri smiled knowingly. "Do not fear words, my child. Words carry weight only when we give them power. Tell me, is it not true that people here mock you for what you do not have?" Amina's heart jumped. How did the stranger know? She said quietly, "They talk but I do not answer. I only pray." The old woman nodded. "Good. Prayers are seeds. They may sleep in the soil, but one day they grow." She reached into her woven bag and brought out a small calabash tied with red string. The smell that came from it was sweet and earthy. "Take this," she said, placing it gently in Amina's hands. "It is not for magic. It is for peace. Boil these herbs in water and drink. Let the warmth remind you that the earth answers in its own time." Amina looked at the calabash carefully. "Thank you, Mama Zuri. But how will this bring peace?" Mama Zuri laughed softly. "Peace does not come from the herbs, my child. It comes from remembering that you are not forgotten. Sometimes the world moves slowly because it is preparing something special." Amina nodded and smiled, though she did not fully understand. Still, she felt a strange comfort she had not known in a long time. They sat together for a while as people passed by, shouting prices and laughter. Mama Zuri told her stories of faraway lands, of a woman who cried for many years because her crops would not grow, until one day, after she helped a starving stranger, her land became the greenest in the valley. "The earth listens," Mama Zuri said. "When you give kindness, you plant blessings that grow in silence." Amina thought about her life, how she had helped others even when they hurt her. Perhaps kindness was her gift, even if motherhood was not. She smiled quietly. After a time, Amina stood to leave. "May the Creator bless you, grandmother," she said, bowing slightly. "Your words have lightened my heart." Mama Zuri smiled and placed her hand on Amina's head. "Go in peace, Amina of Lutanda. You are a tree planted by the river. You may not see your fruit yet, but your roots are deep." When Amina walked away, she felt as though the world had become softer. The noise of the market no longer bothered her. Even the women who had once mocked her seemed far away, like echoes that no longer hurt. She carried the calabash close to her chest, feeling the warmth of the old woman's blessing. That evening when the sun dipped behind the hills, Amina returned home. The sky was painted with gold and red. She found Kwame sitting outside their hut, sharpening his hoe after a long day on the farm. He looked up and smiled. "You seem lighter today," he said. Amina nodded. "I met someone special, an old woman who gave me peace." Kwame raised his eyebrows. "Peace in a calabash?" Amina laughed softly. "Not peace in the herbs. Peace in the heart." She told him about Mama Zuri, her wise words, and the story of the woman who helped a stranger. Kwame listened carefully, then said, "Perhaps the Creator sent her to remind us that all seasons have purpose." That night, Amina boiled the herbs in a clay pot. The steam filled the hut with a sweet smell that seemed to calm her mind. As she sipped the warm drink, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Let my heart stay soft." Days turned into weeks, and the memory of Mama Zuri stayed with her. Whenever someone mocked her or whispered cruelly, Amina no longer felt pain. Instead, she remembered the old woman's smile and her words, "The earth answers in its own time." She began to live more freely. She helped an old man repair his roof. She taught children songs under the mango tree. She visited sick neighbors and brought them food. Slowly, even those who once laughed at her started to see her differently. One afternoon, as she worked in her small garden, a young woman named Binta came to her. Binta had once been among those who mocked Amina the most. Her face was red with shame as she said, "Amina, forgive me. I spoke foolish words about you. I see now that you are a woman of light." Amina looked at her gently. "Forgiveness is easy when the heart is free," she said. "Let the past rest like dry leaves." From that day, Binta often came to learn from her, how to plant herbs, how to cook with kindness, how to speak softly. People began to say that Amina's home was a place of peace. Children played around her garden, and even the wind seemed gentle when it passed through her trees. But though she smiled often, Amina never forgot Mama Zuri. She often wondered where the old woman had gone. Some travelers said they saw her walking along the river, helping strangers in other villages. Others said she was not just a traveler but a spirit of wisdom who appeared only when needed. Amina did not try to find out. She only thanked the heavens for that meeting. Sometimes in the quiet of the evening she would hold the empty calabash and whisper, "Thank you, grandmother. Your peace lives here." And whenever she felt sad or lonely, she remembered the story of the woman whose barren land turned green after she shared her last meal. Amina would look at her garden, now full of life, and smile. She no longer asked, "Why me?" Instead she said, "Thank you for the strength to be kind." In Lutanda, people began to tell her story in the evenings by the fire. They said, "Do you know the woman who met the kind stranger? She learned that the greatest gift is peace of heart." And though many had once mocked her, now they came to her for advice, for her words carried calmness like cool water on a hot day. The market still bustled every week, full of laughter, songs, and the scent of spices, but Amina no longer walked through it with shame. She walked with quiet joy, remembering that one meeting, one moment of kindness, had changed her heart forever. The rains did not come that year. At first, the people of Lutanda thought it was only a delay. They waited, watching the sky every evening for the dark clouds that usually rolled in from the hills. But the sky remained clear and cruelly blue. The air grew hotter, and the wind carried dust instead of the sweet smell of rain. Weeks turned into months. The ground cracked, and the once green fields turned dry and brown. The river where the women fetched water shrank until it became a line of muddy pools. Even the frogs stopped singing at night. The cows grew thin and their bones showed under their skin. Kwame and Amina watched their crops fade slowly. The maize stalks, once tall and proud, bent under the heat. The cassava leaves turned yellow. Each morning, Kwame would go to the farm, dig into the dry soil and sigh. "The earth is tired," he would say. Amina would bring him a calabash of cool water and whisper, "The earth is resting. The rain will return when it is ready." But deep in her heart, she worried. The whole village depended on the harvest, and now even the strongest men looked weary. Children cried from hunger, and mothers walked long distances to find water. The market became quiet, and the laughter that once filled Lutanda faded into silence. Those who had mocked Amina began to feel the bite of hunger the most. Their barns, once full, emptied quickly. Their wells dried first because they had not saved water. Many of them remembered how they had laughed at Amina when she spent time storing rainwater in big clay pots behind her hut. They had called her, the strange woman who plays with pots. Now those pots were her blessing. Amina's garden, though small, remained green. She had planted her crops near a small pit where rainwater used to collect. Every morning she carried water from her pots and poured a little at the roots. Her garden gave her vegetables and a few pumpkins, not much but enough to keep her and Kwame alive. One afternoon as the sun burned fiercely in the sky, Amina saw two children standing by her gate. Their faces were thin and their eyes looked tired. "Auntie Amina," one whispered, "Mother sent us to ask if you have a little food." Amina looked at their small hands and sunburned faces. She did not hesitate. She took some yams from her basket and gave them to the children. "Tell your mother not to worry," she said gently. "Come again tomorrow." Kwame watched quietly. "You gave them so much," he said softly. "Will we have enough for ourselves?" Amina smiled. "When a hand gives, it never stays empty," she said. As the days passed, more people began to come. Old women, men, and children knocked on Amina's door, asking for food or a little water. Some of them were the same people who had once laughed at her. They came with shame in their eyes. One woman named Lela, who had been one of Amina's loudest mockers, came to her house one afternoon. Her lips were dry and her voice trembled. "Amina," she said, "I have nothing left. My children cry at night. Please forgive me for the things I said." Amina looked at her gently. She poured water into a cup and handed it to Lela. "Forgiveness is lighter than anger," she said. "Drink and take some for your children." Lela's eyes filled with tears. "You are kinder than I deserve," she said. Amina smiled. "Kindness costs nothing," she replied. Word spread through Lutanda that Amina's garden was still green. Some people said it was a miracle. Others whispered that her kindness had brought her blessings. But Amina never boasted. She only said, "The earth gives back to those who care for it." Each morning she shared what little she had. If she cooked soup, she made enough for others. If she had 2 yams, she gave one away. The people who came to her house began to work together. They helped fetch water from faraway streams and carried firewood for her. Slowly, the spirit of the village began to change. Kwame watched his wife with pride. "You are the heart of Lutanda," he said one evening. "Even in the dry season you bring life." Amina shook her head. "No, my husband. I'm only a small seed. But seeds grow when they are watered with love." One night, as the wind howled through the dry trees, Amina sat outside looking at the stars. She whispered a quiet prayer. "Creator, thank you for giving me enough to share. Let the rain return and let no one in our village go hungry." As she spoke, a faint breeze passed through the air, cool and soft like the breath of hope. She smiled, feeling something deep inside her heart, a peace that no drought could take away. Days later, the sky began to change. The heat grew softer and clouds started to form in the distance. The people of Lutanda looked up, hardly daring to believe. The elders said, "The spirits have heard us." Children ran out to play in the dust, shouting, "The rain is coming." That night, thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning flashed behind the hills and a cool wind blew through the village. Amina stood outside her hut, her face lifted to the sky. The first drops fell, slow, heavy, and sweet. The smell of rain touched the earth again after many months. People came out of their homes laughing and dancing in the rain. Even Lela and the other women who had once mocked Amina came to her house. They held her hands and said, "You shared with us when you had little. May your garden never dry again." Amina smiled, her hair wet with rain. "It is not me you should thank," she said. "It is the Creator who gives to all." When morning came, the village looked new. The brown earth turned dark with moisture, and tiny green shoots began to appear. The river started to fill again and birds returned to sing in the trees. The drought had ended, but something else had changed too, the hearts of the people. They had learned that pride and mockery brought nothing but emptiness. They saw how one woman's kindness had fed them all. From that day they began to work together, sharing their food and water just as Amina had done. Amina continued to tend her garden, her heart full of gratitude. Sometimes when she walked through the market, people stopped her to greet her warmly. No one mocked her anymore. Instead they said, "May your kindness multiply, Amina." She never spoke of the pain she had once felt, nor did she remind anyone of their cruelty. She believed the drought had washed it all away, just as the rain cleans the dust from the leaves. Kwame often said, "When others saw dryness, you saw hope. That is why our garden never died." Amina would laugh softly. "Hope is like a seed, Kwame. You bury it in the dark, but it still grows." The people of Lutanda would always remember that dry year, not for the hunger or the hardship, but for how a woman with a soft heart and a few pots of water had taught them the true meaning of generosity. The rain had come back to Lutanda, soft at first, like the touch of forgiveness. It washed the dust from the trees and filled the air with the smell of new life. After many dry months, the earth drank deeply and green began to return everywhere. Birds sang again and children splashed in puddles, laughing as if they had never known hunger. Amina stood outside her hut one morning, feeling the rain on her face. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. Her garden had come alive again. New leaves stretched toward the sky, and the flowers swayed gently with the wind. The sound of raindrops on her roof was like music to her soul. Kwame joined her, carrying a small basket of seedlings. "The land is smiling again," he said. "We will plant today." Amina nodded, smiling back at him. "The earth never forgets kindness," she said softly. As they worked together, planting seeds in the moist soil, Amina felt something strange. It was a light flutter deep within her belly, so soft she almost thought she had imagined it. She stopped digging and placed her hand on her stomach. The feeling came again, a tiny stirring like a whisper of life. Her heart skipped a beat. Kwame looked at her with concern. "What is it, Amina?" She smiled, her eyes wide with wonder. "I felt something inside me," she said. "Like a bird moving under my heart." Kwame froze, not daring to believe. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then he smiled, tears shining in his eyes. "Could it be?" he whispered. Amina's smile grew and she nodded slowly. "Maybe the Creator has remembered us at last." The news spread quietly at first. Amina did not speak much about it, she wanted to be sure. But the women who visited her could see the change. Her glow, her calm joy, her gentle humming as she worked. Soon word reached every corner of Lutanda. Amina, the barren woman, was carrying life in her womb. The same people who had once mocked her now spoke her name with respect. Some felt ashamed, remembering their cruel words. Others wept with happiness for her. The village elder, Baba Kato, came to her house and said, "You have taught us patience, Amina. The Creator always writes the last line." Months passed, and Amina's belly grew round like the full moon. She became the center of love and attention. The women came to help her with chores. They brought her food, mats, and warm cloths. Even Mama Zuri's name was mentioned, the wise old traveler who had once blessed her. Some said the herbs had worked a miracle, but Amina knew it was not magic. It was time, the right time that the old woman had spoken about. Each evening, Amina and Kwame would sit outside, watching the sunset turn the sky golden. Kwame would rest his hand gently on her belly, feeling the tiny kicks of life. "He is strong," he would say proudly. Or she, Amina would tease. "Let us not forget the Creator's surprises." Sometimes when the baby moved she would close her eyes and remember the hard years. The pain, the whispers, the tears she had cried when she thought she would never hold a child. Now all that sorrow felt like a distant storm that had passed, leaving behind the fresh smell of rain. The day of birth came after a long night of thunder and heavy rain. The midwives came running to her hut, their heads covered with cloth to protect them from the downpour. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the smell of herbs. Amina labored bravely, her hand gripping Kwame's tightly. He whispered prayers beside her, his voice trembling with fear and love. Then, as dawn broke and the rain softened into mist, the sound of a baby's cry filled the hut. The midwives smiled and lifted the small child into Amina's arms. "It is a boy," one said with joy. Amina looked down at the tiny face, the soft skin, the small hands curling in the air. Her heart swelled. "My son," she whispered, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. "You are the promise we waited for." Kwame knelt beside her, his eyes wet. "Tari," he said softly. "His name will be Tari. It means promise." The news spread like fire through the village. People came running, shouting with joy. The drums began to beat before noon and songs filled the air. The whole village celebrated not just for Amina and Kwame but for what the birth meant, a reminder that sorrow never lasts forever. Women brought gifts of food, cloth, and beads. Men came with yams and firewood. The children danced in the yard, singing, "Amina has a son. Amina has a son." Even the elders came, their eyes shining with pride. Amina sat on a mat, holding baby Tari close to her chest. She looked at the faces around her, the same faces that had once looked at her with pity and laughter. But there was no anger in her heart, only peace. When the singing quieted, Amina spoke softly so all could hear. "My brothers and sisters," she said, "let no one mock another's sorrow. The seasons always change. The river may dry but it will flow again. The tree may lose its leaves but it will bloom once more. I have learned that patience is stronger than pain." The crowd nodded, moved by her words. Lela, the woman who had once mocked her most, came forward and knelt before her. "Forgive me, Amina," she said. "Your kindness shamed me more than any punishment ever could." Amina touched her shoulder gently. "Rise, my sister," she said. "We are all students of life. The lesson is not to be cruel when the earth sleeps, for one day it wakes again." That evening the celebration continued. The air was filled with laughter, songs, and the smell of roasted maize. The elders told the children, "This is the story of hope, the story of Amina and the promised child." As night fell, the village grew quiet again. Amina sat by the door of her hut, watching the stars sparkle above. Kwame sat beside her, rocking baby Tari gently in his arms. "Can you believe this, Amina?" he said softly. "After all those years we are parents." Amina smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "The Creator never forgets," she said. "We just needed to wait for our season." In the distance, the frogs sang again by the river, and the night breeze carried the sweet smell of wet earth. It was as if all of Lutanda had taken a deep breath of peace. Amina watched her baby sleeping, his tiny chest rising and falling. She thought of the days when she had cried alone, the nights she had prayed under the stars, and the words of Mama Zuri, "The earth answers in its own time." Now she understood them fully. The woman who had once been called barren was now called blessed. And her story became a song the villagers sang to remind themselves that no pain lasts forever, and no dream is too late to bloom. As the moon rose over the quiet village, Amina whispered softly, "Thank you, Creator, for the rain, for the promise, and for the lesson of patience." And from the cradle, baby Tari stirred and smiled in his sleep, as if he too knew he was born from the prayers of love and hope. The sun was warm and gentle over Lutanda that afternoon. The mango tree near Amina's home had grown tall and wide over the years, its branches stretching like arms ready to hug the world. Beneath its shade, Amina sat on a woven mat, watching a group of children play in the yard. Their laughter filled the air, light, pure, and full of life. Some of them were hers, some belonged to her neighbors. But to Amina they were all her children. Tari had grown into a strong and kind young man. He helped his father in the fields and always greeted the elders with respect. People in the village often said, "Kwame and Amina have raised a son with a heart like sunshine." When he wasn't working, Tari would play the drum or tell stories to the little ones under the mango tree, just as his mother used to tell him. The years had changed Amina. Her hair now carried silver strands and her hands showed the marks of time. But her eyes were still bright and calm, full of peace. She no longer hurried through life. She took joy in small things, the chirping of birds, the smell of ripe fruit, the laughter of children. People often came to visit her. They brought gifts, baskets of fruit, gourds of milk, or handmade mats. But most of all they came for her words. Those who had once mocked her now sought her advice and blessings. Whenever a young woman in Lutanda faced hardship, her mother would say, "Go to Amina. She knows how to wait with grace." One morning, a woman named Lela came to her again. Years had passed since the drought and the birth of Tari, yet Lela still remembered the shame she once carried for her cruel words. She now had 2 daughters of her own and came with one of them to visit Amina. "Auntie Amina," Lela said, bowing slightly, "my daughter is soon to marry. She wishes for your blessing." Amina smiled warmly. "Ah, my child is becoming a woman," she said softly. "Come, sit beside me." The young girl knelt near her and held out a small basket of flowers. Amina touched her head gently and whispered a short prayer. "May your home be full of peace and may your heart always choose kindness." Lela wiped a tear from her eye. "You bless us even when we once brought you pain," she said. Amina laughed softly. "Pain is a teacher, my sister. It taught me that kindness outlives mockery. If I had answered anger with anger, I would have nothing to give today." Lela nodded and looked down, humbled by her words. As the day went on, more villagers came to the mango tree. An old man with a walking stick came to tell her that his crops had grown strong after he followed her advice about saving water. A young mother came to ask how to calm her crying baby. A group of children brought her ripe guavas as a gift. They all called her Mama Amina, the mother of wisdom. Sometimes she would sit quietly and think of the old days, the hard years when she had been mocked, when her house was filled with silence and sorrow. She remembered how lonely she had felt, how she had prayed under the stars, wondering if anyone heard her. Now, looking around at the happy faces, she knew that every tear had been a seed. Those seeds had grown into the peace she now lived in. Kwame often joined her under the mango tree. He would sit beside her, his hands rough from years of farming but his smile gentle. They spoke little because words were not always needed between them. Their hearts had already spoken enough through all the seasons they had shared. One evening as the sun began to set, Tari came home from the fields. He sat at Amina's feet, resting his head on her knee. "Mother," he said, People say that when you were younger many laughed at you. Is that true? Amina smiled, brushing his hair gently. Yes, it is true, she said. But laughter fades faster than love. Those who mocked me taught me patience even without knowing it. Tari looked up, puzzled. How can mockery teach patience? Because, she said softly, when people are unkind you have two choices, to become bitter or to become better. I chose to become better. Tari nodded slowly, understanding. And because you chose that I am here today, he said. Amina's eyes filled with tears. Yes, she whispered. You are the fruit of patience, my son. That night, the village gathered for a harvest celebration. The air was full of the smell of roasted maize and fresh yam. Drums echoed through the fields, and the people danced under the moonlight. As they celebrated, Baba Cato the elder called out, Let us remember the woman who taught us the strength of waiting, Amina, mother of promise. Everyone clapped and cheered. Amina blushed and tried to hide her face, but the people insisted she speak. She stood slowly and faced the crowd. My friends, she said, her voice steady and full of warmth, life is like the seasons. There is a time for sun and a time for rain. A time for sorrow and a time for joy. When the earth sleeps, it is not dead, it is only preparing to bloom again. Never mock another's pain, for you do not know what blessings tomorrow may bring. The crowd listened silently, her words sinking deep into their hearts. When she finished, they began to sing a song of gratitude and peace. Even the children joined in, their small voices echoing in the night. From that day her story was told again and again in Lutanda. The elders used it to teach the young that patience and kindness were stronger than pride or mockery. Mothers told their daughters, remember Amina. When life is hard, wait like she did. The earth always answers. Years continued to pass. Amina grew older, but her spirit stayed young. Her garden still bloomed with bright flowers, and the mango tree gave more fruit than ever. She would sit beneath it every afternoon telling stories to the children, stories about rain, hope, and the quiet power of kindness. Sometimes when a child asked her, Mama Amina, how did you become so wise? She would smile and say, wisdom grows when you stop fighting the storms and start learning from them. One quiet evening, as the sun painted the sky orange and gold, Amina watched Tari walking home with his wife and their little son. The boy ran ahead, laughing, his small feet kicking up dust. Amina's heart swelled with joy. She whispered softly, the promise continues. She leaned back against the mango tree, listening to the rustling leaves. The village around her was peaceful, full of life, laughter, and the sound of drums in the distance. She knew that her journey, with all its tears and triumphs, had been worth it. A gentle breeze passed through the branches, carrying her words as if they were part of the wind itself. Kindness outlives mockery and patience brings fruit. And in the heart of Lutanda, her story remained, not written in books, but carried in the hearts of her people, whispered to every child who grew up under the shade of that mango tree.